Hi, this is Ed Fitzpatrick. If you enjoy local politics as much as I do, be sure to join our friends at Rhode Island PBS for the show A Lively Experiment. Hosted by Jim Hummel, the weekly series features journalists, pundits, and politicians debating the stories and issues that matter most to us Rhode Islanders. Tune in to A Lively Experiment and be part of the conversation. Fridays at 7 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS and wherever you get your podcasts. From the Boston Globe, this is Rhode Island Report. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. Welcome back to the podcast where we bring you big conversations from our very small state. Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Neronha is blasting Governor Dan McKee for not funding new positions for his office as it battles President Trump's agenda. In a House Finance budget hearing last week, he said, if you're not standing with us, then you're standing with Trump. The Attorney General is here to tell us more. Attorney General Peter Neronha, thank you for talking with us today.
Sure, Ed. Good to be with you.
Now, I heard you testify before a House Finance Subcommittee last week about your office's budget. Let's listen to part of what you said.
If this governor really believed that Donald Trump was a danger to our democracy, as he plainly is, he would be standing with my office instead of trying to thwart it. He would be enhancing my budget instead of trying to hurt it. And if you're not standing with us, then you're standing with Trump.
So do you believe that Governor McKee, a Democratic governor, is actually standing with President Trump? And what's the issue here?
Yeah, look, I think that Governor McKee is doing what he often does in this situation, which is putting his personal problems with me ahead of what's best for Rhode Island. The only people capable right now of pushing back against this president are people who are in a position to sue him. This president is not someone you can negotiate with. He's not someone you can trust. Appeasing him will only lead to more problems later. And so the most effective group, frankly, that's able to push back and try to hold our democracy to its ideals are attorneys general. And the truth is that around the country, for example, my colleague in California, his General Assembly and governor gave his office an additional $25 million to do the kind of work that we're doing here. In Hawaii, small state like ours, at least in terms of its size, $5 million additional. Here in Rhode Island, I asked the governor for additional positions. And as usual, you don't even get a phone call, let alone even one of the 15 positions I'm looking for. So it's not a result that I didn't expect, but if the governor could put his personal dislike of me because I had the nerve to investigate his misconduct as I would call it, not illegal, but misconduct nonetheless, and really wanted to stand up to this president as he literally threatened a third of our state budget, then he should be enhancing my budget so that we can do this work.
So give us the details. How much additional funding did you request from the governor in this year's state budget, and how much did you receive?
Well, we asked for 15 positions. In round numbers, that typically cost, $3 million. We didn't get any of them. And then there's some other, things around cyber protection, body-worn camera work that we need to do to comply with either best practices or our statutory obligations. The governor didn't accept those packages.
Governor McKee and his administration have made it clear that the COVID money has dried up from the federal government and that difficult decisions are made to right-size the government. So are they wrong to be turning down funding requests like yours?
Sure. When the president, through his OMB memo, froze 1/3 of our state's budget, okay? That $2 million pales in comparison to that threat. And we stopped that threat. But if the governor thinks that's the last one that will be brought against this state, well, he's kidding himself. The money for the Washington Bridge, not assured. If that doesn't work out, who's going to be in a position to have to go to court to try to get it? My office.
Is there anything new on the funding for the Washington Bridge? Because I know the McKee administration has asked the federal government to allow that to be drawn down to, $220 million? Mm-hmm. Is there anything new on that?
Well, asking is not the same thing as being obligated to give it. And so my concern is that if the Trump administration decides that the answer to that ask is no, and there is an obligation, well, it's going to be my office is going to have to go to court to try to get it, just like we did when the president froze, for example, Medicaid funding, 6 weeks ago. That's going to be us. And so we need to be strong. And the governor, by not investing in us, I think is making a mistake. Now, that said, I'm confident that the Speaker and the Senate President will support the office, much the way they did 2 years ago, to great effect for Rhode Islanders. So in the end, we'll get where we need to go. But I don't think the governor should escape responsibility for putting his personal interests ahead of the public's.
As you point out, this is not the first time that you've been at odds with Governor McKee over requests to add funding to your office. So remind us what happened in 2023. Did you end up getting the funding you were seeking then?
We got the positions, and my office paid for the funding out of legal fees that we recovered in the opioid cases that we brought. And we can do that again here. It's really about we need the actual physical, if you will. They're called FTEs, full-time equivalents. We need the job openings, and then we can backfill them through money that we've recovered. So at the end of the day, back then, Ed, we got 15 positions that we're paying for out of monies we've recovered. And those lawyers come to work every day working for the taxpayers, and the taxpayers don't pay a cent of their salaries.
So did you present these additional funding requests and positions as a means of battling the Trump administration? Because I know some of the positions don't have anything to do with that litigation. There's a 3-employee charities unit, for example. How are they tied in?
Yeah, they're tied because nobody in my office is doing the Trump work full time. So, for example, my healthcare team, the leader of my healthcare team, Sarah Rice, was the one who argued the OMB case in front of Jack McConnell. So all of my people are effectively doing two roles. They're doing some Trump work, and they're doing some of the other work that needs to be done for the people of the state of Rhode Island. So by enhancing my positions, I'm able to build out that work as well as the work that we do on behalf of Rhode Islanders every day.
And can you outline some of the steps your office has taken to challenge Trump's funding freezes and the executive orders he's issued?
Sure. In my view, the most important case is the Office of Management and Budget case, whereby the administration, as I said earlier, took the position that they were freezing 1/3 of our state's budget. So the president now will tell us that Medicaid wasn't on the table. Well, it was on the table because when state officials in the governor's administration tried to draw it down, they couldn't. And they were told by the federal government that the monies were paused. That's, I know, in my view, the most important case that's been brought. It's been brought here in Rhode Island, and my team has been a lead on that case. Sarah argued that case before Jack McConnell. Sarah Rice, Assistant Attorney General Sarah Rice. We're involved in the case in Massachusetts involving NIH funding. We're involved in the cases involving Elon Musk. But by far, the most important case is that OMB case here. That continues. That case is going to be appealed. We're going to have to be arguing that case in the First Circuit. So that case will go on, and it's incredibly important to the people of the state.
So taking a step back from the details of those legal challenges, what do you see Donald Trump doing right now?
I think this president, if we look at what he's doing, we can draw a conclusion as to who he is at his core. So if you think about that OMB case that I keep referring to, what was that? That was money for healthcare. It was money for Medicaid, for example, education, law enforcement. So it wasn't just Rhode Island. The drug trafficking task force in Arizona, their funds were frozen. So when you look at that case, all of that money was obligated by the Congress. Federal tax money that we pay in our federal taxes went down to Washington. Congress sent it back out to the states to do important work. The president froze that because he had some issue with those funds. So what he's effectively done there is sideline the Congress. The Congress, as we all learn in high school or even earlier, has the power of the purse among its authorities. But we all learn the power of the purse is their most important power. The president took that power and abrogated it to himself. That's one branch of our government effectively sidelined. And then when we brought a lawsuit, because we viewed that act as patently unconstitutional, and we won victories there and elsewhere, the president began to undermine the legitimacy of the courts. Not only Judge McConnell here, but courts all over this country, as has the vice president, as has Elon Musk, to the point where Chief Justice Roberts had to come out and speak against it last week, and the president persisted in undermining the judiciary. So that's our third branch of government. So if you think about it, if you go back to our founders, our framers, those three parts of our government, legislative, judiciary, and executive, were designed to not have all of the power. And that tension among those branches is what keeps our freedom safe. the president, by sidelining the Congress and undermining the legitimacy of the court, is abrogating all of the authority to himself. And to me, that's consistent with his authoritarian instincts, and that's really troubling for our democracy.
We'll have more with Attorney General Peter Neronha after a quick break. When you want to go beyond the headlines, let me recommend Rhode Island PBS Weekly. Rhode Island PBS Weekly is an award-winning news magazine broadcast that gives you the full story, powered by investigative journalism and narrative storytelling. New episodes of Rhode Island PBS Weekly drop Sundays at 7:30 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS. Watch past episodes at ripbs.org/weekly. That's ripbs.org/weekly. So Governor McKee recently announced that he will seek re-election in 2026, and his video announcement said, "Today, Governor McKee is fighting to protect our state from Trump's radical agenda and chaotic leadership." What's your reaction to that statement?
How? Governor McKee was really late to this fight. I mean, his first words about President Trump that first week were, well, you know, things were going pretty well, I thought. I'm paraphrasing. And now I have some concerns. I mean, as attorneys general, we were getting ready 6 months in advance in case of the possibility that President Trump would take office, because we knew we had to be ready to act right away. What exactly the governor's talking about in that opening of his ad, I'm not really sure. It certainly doesn't resonate with me, and I can't imagine it resonates with many Rhode Islanders.
So, as you noted, in October, you released a report on the ILO group education contract. The governor then accused you of a politically motivated investigation into that multi-million-dollar state contract. So what do you say to the listeners who are hearing this and saying, oh, it's just another example of you and Governor McKee not liking each other?
Yeah, look, all I can say is that, I think the voters can and have judged me by my actions. That report and all of its supporting documents that we did with the state police is up on my website for them to read and judge for themselves. You know, this issue about fighting back against Trump, I can point to the things that we're doing. I can point to the support that we'll get from the Speaker and the Senate President. The governor's chosen not to do it. I've been leading offices now, Ed, for 15 years, and the track record, I think, is pretty clear, and I think Rhode Islanders realize that, and I'm proud of the record, and I'm proud to stand by it and on it.
Others might be wondering if you're planning to run for governor in 2026. What's your latest thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, somebody asked me that the other day in the media, and I'll tell you what I told them. You know, there are days when I'm conflicted, and there are days when I'm ambivalent. I enjoy leading the Attorney General's office. I think I know how to put together a staff that can improve wherever I am, and certainly could do that as governor. I believe that I could do the work and do it well. But I'm not sure that's how I want to spend my 60s, and I have to figure that out.
Well, listening to you testify the other day at the House Finance Committee, I didn't see a guy who was looking forward to sailing after you leave office. I mean, if you were going to run, would it be for governor? Would you ever consider lieutenant governor or some other office?
You know, I don't know that I'm wired to be a number two, honestly, if I'm being honest with myself. You know, I led the U.S. Attorney's Office for nearly 8 years. I will have led the AG's office for 8 years. You know, I'm sort of the person who's had to make the final decisions and be able to stand by them and explain them. I think I'm just wired that way. You know, there may be a way for me to continue to serve, but I'm just not sure that's how I want to spend the next decade of my life. I have 2 children that I'm immensely proud of. They're now adults, but they're living in states on the other side. Well, if not on the other side, nearly on the other side of the Mississippi. And so they're not just down the road. So I've got to think about how I want to spend that next decade.
But you're still considering running for governor in 2026.
Yeah, I haven't ruled anything out, Ed. I think there's going to be a need. I feel confident that Rhode Islanders, I feel confident that they have viewed my work and the work of my office in a positive way as we've transformed that office. And look, you know, if I think that there's a path and a need for me to explore that office, then I would, but it's going to be a conversation with my family first and foremost.
What do you think this role that you're playing now as an opponent of the Trump agenda sets you up to run for governor?
Well, look, I think that people are looking for hope. Some people, at least, are looking for hope in what to them and to me appears like a dark moment in our nation's history. I think attorneys general, whether they're here in Rhode Island or elsewhere, are well positioned to lead that fight. I think leadership is always what government is about, whether you're governor or attorney general or something else. And I think that, this will be a test of our leadership as everything else has been over the last several years. But I will say this. I think there are a lot of AGs now that are governors. I think, Governor Mills in Maine is a real battler. If I'd been sitting in that room with her, I would have said something in the moment when the president bullied her the way that he did.
If you don't run for governor, do you see leadership qualities in some of the other potential candidates, Helena Foulkes, Joe Shekarchi, the House Speaker, for instance?
Yeah, I do. I think both of those people, Helena and Joe Shekarchi, are both high-quality individuals that know how to lead and get things done.
I also want to ask you about legislation which passed the Senate on February 26th that would tweak the definition of a misdemeanor to be an offense with a maximum sentence of 364 days instead of 365 days. Senator Jonathan Acosta, the sponsor, said the goal is to prevent the detention or deportation of immigrants for lesser crimes. And he said that's crucial now that Trump is vowing mass deportations. Do you support that bill or not?
I don't support the bill in its current form, no. In fact, I have a meeting with some of the sponsors of that bill right after we're done here. What I worry about are unintended consequences. There are very few crimes that are victimless and don't impact somebody in a serious way. I've prosecuted serious, simple assaults, serious domestic assaults, misdemeanors, but with plenty of injury. The photographs that I could show you or those legislators would cause them real pause as to why they're not felonies. Look, if you're here in the country unlawfully, you're not supposed to be here in the first place. I recognize that there are many people who are here and are here unlawfully that are contributing to our society in significant ways and are good people. And I don't believe should be the target of our immigration efforts. We should be thinking about how we address their lack of legitimate residency and try to convert that into something that is lawful. But if you've committed a crime here, and a serious crime where someone's been injured, then I don't have any tolerance for that. And I don't think Rhode Islanders want those people out on bail for 2-3 years while their crime works its way through the criminal justice system, which is going to happen in all but a capital offense. My view is this. If you are committing crimes in the state of Rhode Island, no matter who you are, here lawfully or you're a resident, lawful permanent resident or citizen, you deserve our law enforcement focus. I can see a path to supporting aspects of that bill, but I don't support it in its current form.
Senator Costa said Senate staff completed a review and found that the more egregious misdemeanors would still be covered by provisions of the federal immigration policy, even if this bill becomes law. What do you think of that?
Well, look, I think to the extent you can find carve-outs, that's fine. But with respect to Senator Acosta, he hasn't been a prosecutor for nearly 30 years. And what I worry about are things like second and third offenses that become felonies. If those first offenses, second offenses don't become the kind of offense that can lead to that felony offense, for example, a felony domestic assault, I want to make sure that that conduct is addressed. So, I don't believe that research is as yet exhaustive enough. And so I'm not going to support a bill that I don't think protects Rhode Islanders adequately. I've spent most of my career doing that. And I've seen the consequences when victims are victimized in such a way that it impacts their lives in ways that'll be lasting for many, many years.
Finally, I want to get your thoughts on the Trump administration memo threatening to use government power to punish any law firms that, in his view, unfairly challenge his administration, and what you made of one of the country's premier law firms, Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, striking a deal with the White House to spare that company from a punitive decree.
Yeah, I think Paul Weiss should have fought back. I think, I think the president is he makes threats that, they're almost laughable to me. I mean, you want to file a bar complaint against me for bringing a frivolous lawsuit? Well, then bring it on. I'm not worried about that. We keep winning, and there's a reason for that. And it's not because the lawsuits we're bringing are frivolous. Here's the other thing. I don't think the president, he's been the subject of a trial, but he's never actually tried a case. And what I will tell you is this. It's really hard to get juries to come back and convict people without sufficient evidence. Jurors innately, in the end, I think, almost always do the right thing. And if you got to get 12 of them to agree, that may not be in a civil case. Talk about the criminal context now, but you got to get a majority or a unanimous verdict. You better have a pretty good case. And the president doesn't have a good case almost every time he tries to bring one. So if I were Paul Weiss, I would have fought back. And I can tell you this, AGs are not going to cow down to this president. We're going to keep fighting. That's how we're wired. And I think Americans and Rhode Island residents should take some hope in that.
Attorney General Neronha, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks, Ed. Good to be with you.
Rhode Island Report is a production of the Boston Globe in collaboration with Rhode Island PBS. Today's episode was produced by Megan Hall. Audio mixing and mastering by Marissa Ewing of Hemlock Creek Productions. Our music is from APM. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. See you next week. Looking to binge watch all your favorite PBS shows? You need Rhode Island PBS Passport. Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, Rhode Island PBS Weekly, and many more. Watch them all, anytime, and from any streaming device. Learn more about this member benefit at ripbs.org/passport. That's ripbs.org/passport.